Today's sutta is from the section on kings from the Anguttara Nikāya, in the Book of the Fives, sutta number 140. And it's the Sota Sutta. So, Anguttara Nikāya, Numerical Discourses, Book 5, so it's 5.140, 140. In English, I translated as the title, Attentive Listener. Attentive Listener. Here we get a sutta from, amidst other suttas, where Lord Buddha talks about, he starts talking about the Cakkavatin, who is a universal, Dhamma protecting monarch, whose appearance is as rare as the appearance of a Buddha. But he doesn't just discuss the attributes and the qualities of a Cakkavatin. He also talks about the son of a Cakkavatin, of a universal monarch. But then what interests us is the connection that Lord Buddha makes towards the Dhamma as something, the very thing that is far superior to any universal monarch. The qualities of the Dhamma, the attributes of the Dhamma, are the very DNA that animates such a unique being, including a Buddha. We see several times throughout the suttas where Lord Buddha even places the Dhamma above himself. He has been the revealer of the Dhamma, the elucidator, the expositor of the Dhamma, of course. But other times we see how he says, he who sees me sees the Dhamma, he who sees the Dhamma sees me. That makes the Dhamma far superior, because Buddhas will come, Buddhas will go, but the Dhamma will remain. And that is what we are aspiring towards when we practice. We're not looking for something otherworldly, somewhere far away, in another time. We experience the Dhamma in this life, in the life that you're living, you're experiencing, because this is where you also experience the challenges that makes a universal monarch, that makes a Buddha be a Buddha, a Siddhartha Gautama, a Bodhisattva, to become the Buddha, because of all the difficulties that he has to go through, which are not so different than the challenges and the difficulties that we have to go through in life. But the human brain, the human mind, always seeks this otherworldly thing somewhere where everything will be just perfect. Everything will just be so smooth. There is no such place. If here is not the place for it, for us to see and encounter the Dhamma. Otherwise, it can be just another form of escapism, running away from responsibilities. And the Dhamma is not about running away. It is about meeting our challenges. Because there's another section within these 10 suttas in this collection, because the Anguttara Nikāya come in sections that are usually listed as 10 suttas, 10 bundles. So each book could have several bundles like that. So in this bundle of 10, we also see how Lord Buddha talks about the Bhikkhu who is really struggling and facing one's own challenges, not to give up, and to learn, and to use the six sense doors, because six sense doors are not simply doorways for pleasure, they're also doorways for pain. They're also causes for discomfort. So it's easy for the mind to just say, I like the pleasurable, but I don't like this. Push this away. Well, what are we learning from life then? How can the Dhamma be established in the heart then? It's not, because we're doing, again, preferential treatment. We're going from one side or one extreme of the pendulum to the other. So in this sutta, as if all the other 9 suttas come together to bring about this most fruitful of all among the 10, and that is putting the usage of metaphors and analogies that Lord Buddha was so excellent in to demonstrate the point, to demonstrate the teaching, the crux, the juiciness of the whole 10. It comes to full bloom. And the title also is very apt, is appropriate. We need to attentively listen, because through listening, we will also see aspects of our lives that are very much in conjunction, go hand to hand, hand in hand with whatever challenges that Lord Buddha is talking about in these suttas. We don't rather exclude our lives from the lives of students, including the bhikkhus that Lord Buddha is talking about. If the Dhamma is to be attained, it will be attained in your life, in this life. Here, now. And that's what every sutta is trying to demonstrate for us, encouragingly. So without further ado, let us begin. So, Anguttara Nikāya 5.140, Sota Sutta. Bhikkhus, by possessing these 5 things, the king's bull elephant becomes worthy, suitable, and fit to be in the king's royal services, proudly considered as a symbol of kingship. What are these 5? Before I continue, you have several suttas throughout the Nikāyas where Lord Buddha uses these, I guess we can call them the king's requisites. Bhikkhus have our own requisites, 4, but the king has several. And to be called a king, especially in those days, one of them is the royal king elephant, or the king's bull elephant. Which had to have a certain type of a training, has to be of a certain pedigree, a certain strength. All other elephants should be scared of it. It would be sent to the battles, to the war, without having any fear. Spears would be thrown, arrows could be thrown, shot at the animal, but the royal elephant will never retreat. And similarly, in other suttas, you have Lord Buddha talking about the king's royal stallion, the thoroughbred horse. So he talks about that as well. And then he also talks about the king's minister, all these things. So they have to be the top of the top, the highest of the highest quality of that. In this case, Lord Buddha is using the example of naga, or a naga is also a term that we see in Pali used for a really highest quality royal elephant. A naga is also a metaphor for an arahant, by the way, not just the nagas that we see in the 31 layers of existence as one of the beings, class of beings of the 4 great kings. So anyhow, so these are the 5 qualities to be seen within king's bull elephant. Let's continue. Here, bhikkhus, the king's bull elephant listens attentively. He is a destroyer. He is a protector. He patiently endures and is one who courageously marches forward. That is a tall list, isn't it? To have all these qualities. Because after all, this is not just a mere elephant. This is the king's elephant. And how? Because so Lord Buddha delineated those 5, and now he's going to be explaining each one of these about the elephant. Then we're going to see how Lord Buddha connects it to the bhikkhu, to the practitioner, not just the bhikkhu, but to the practitioner. How the practitioner will have has to have these same qualities. And how, bhikkhus, does the king's elephant listen attentively? Here, bhikkhus, the king's bull elephant calls to mind whatever the elephant trainer has trained him to do. Whether that training was given earlier or not, the king's bull elephant listens carefully and attentively, heeding it, directing his mind to what was said, as he recalls everything. In this manner, the king's bull elephant listens attentively. Because the king's elephant trainer, might have given several different instructions to the elephant as the elephant was captured from a young child, a young little baby elephant. So over its lifetime, it might have received several instructions, prompts, but in the middle of a battle or a difficult situation, the trainer has also trained the bull elephant to respond to the situation at hand, and not just to be programmed automatically to respond in a certain situation, because it has to be very attentively, carefully listening, because there would be or might be new instructions coming in. So the elephant cannot just say, well, this is how it is all the time. And sometimes we capture ourselves in our practice, right? We say, well, this is how it's supposed to be always in the suttas. Well, given the situation, Lord Buddha always tries to encourage us to be light-footed, meaning be light on our feet, meaning to be looking at the situation without breaking sila, without losing our awareness, concentration, calmness, equanimity of the mind, to respond to that particular situation as needed. And that gives you responsibility, which can only come from attentive listening. So here we see already the king's bull elephant responding as an attentive listener. And how, bhikkhus, does the king's bull elephant become a destroyer? Here, bhikkhus, when the king's bull elephant has gone to the battlefield, he destroys the enemy's elephants, their riders, horses, riders on horses, battle chariots, and their charioteers, along with the foot soldiers. In this manner, the king's bull elephant is a destroyer. In the old days, armies would pride themselves as having the greatest of weaponry in the presence of elephants. And the elephants would be decked in so many different types of weaponry themselves, added fixtures upon the elephant. So instead of just having tusks, the tusks would be also laden with other metals and other things, really outlandish attire, headgear, this and that. Plus, the riders of elephants would also be carrying bugles and horns and drums, all these things to maximize the size and how big of a menace this is, enough so to terrify the opponents. So as it's doing this, it will destroy all these other forces of the enemy. And how, bhikkhus, does the king's bull elephant become a protector? So it was a destroyer, now it's a protector. Here, bhikkhus, when the king's bull elephant has gone to the battlefield, he protects the front part of his body, the hind part, or the backside of his body, his front legs, his back legs, his head, his ears, his tusks, his trunk, his tail, and the rider on his back, including the rider who's riding him. In this manner, the king's bull elephant is a protector. And later you will see how Lord Buddha connects these two. This is a metaphor. Remember, Lord Buddha was a master at using metaphors and analogies to make us understand what it is difficult to be comprehended and understood. And how, bhikkhus, does the king's bull elephant patiently endure? Here, bhikkhus, when the king's bull elephant has gone to the battlefield, he endures blows from long spears, swords, arrows, and thrown axes. He endures the sounds of large, deafening drums and conches, and the pouring of heated liquids. In this manner, the king's bull elephant patiently endures. So you can imagine, if you've ever seen a historic movie, or even some movies that would came out some 10, 20 years ago, like Lord of the Rings and things like that. If you've ever followed movies like that, you see how the animals, such as the big, animals like elephants, would do all this damage, but also they would be exposed to so much abuse and thrown axes, and even as they're entering city walls, there would be ambushes and traps waiting for them, like the throwing of heated liquids. In traveling in Europe, and especially in India, I've seen some old castles where they have special openings right on top of the main gates of the palace. And the openings would be just there to pour hot liquids upon both people and animals trying to invade or enter the city walls. And how, bhikkhus, does the king's bull elephant courageously march forward? Here, bhikkhus, in whatever direction the elephant trainer sends him, the king's bull elephant goes in the direction or region his trainer sends him to, whether having gone there before or not. He goes in the direction and region and does so quietly. In this manner, the king's bull elephant courageously marches forward. It doesn't say, well, wait a minute, I never seen this area of the country, this region. This is taboo. I can't enter this area. It doesn't say that. It has been trained in such a way that where anything or any region is open field for it to go ahead, because the trainer is sending him to in that direction. So that requires tremendous trust. Even an elephant needs to have that trust. Otherwise, it won't listen. It won't go. The same with a horse. It can tell from the rider if the rider knows what they're doing. Even from the voice, it will detect if there's any fear or hesitation, trepidation. Therefore, by possessing these 5 things, the king's bull elephant becomes worthy, suitable, and fit to be in the king's royal services, proudly considered as a symbol of kingship. In the same manner, this is what it really interests us. In the same manner, bhikkhus, by possessing these 5 traits, a bhikkhu becomes worthy of gifts, deserving of offerings, qualified to receive hospitality, well suited to receive reverential salutations with one's palms at the heart, and fit to be called the unsurpassed field of merits for the world. What are these 5? By the way, this is a shortened version of when we do the iti piso, but especially when we get to the Sangha section. Supatipanno bhagavato savaka sangha ujupati. When you recite that, the qualities of the Sangha, here Lord Buddha is delineating 5 of those qualities that make him truly a thoroughbred, truly deserving of those qualities, and also deserving of the title, unsurpassed field of merits for the world. Here, bhikkhus, the bhikkhu listens attentively. So he's now going to use exactly the same qualifiers that he used for the elephant, but he's talking about the bhikkhu. Here, bhikkhus, the bhikkhu listens attentively. He is a destroyer. He is a protector. He patiently endures and is one who courageously marches forward. And how, bhikkhus, does the bhikkhu listen attentively? Here, bhikkhus, the bhikkhu recalls whatever teaching he has heard in the Dhamma and discipline as taught by the Tathagata. Dhamma and Vinaya. Discipline, that's what we mean by it's the Vinaya. While he carefully and attentively listens to the Dhamma, heeding it and directing his mind to what was said, as he recalls everything. In this manner, the bhikkhu listens attentively. He doesn't let things slip by. He's always like a sponge, a dry sponge in the middle of a very full bucket of water. It will soak it in. Every time the Dhamma, there's something to do with the Dhamma, the mind, the ears, all the six senses are open, not to be missing anything. Now, earlier I mentioned how this is not just for bhikkhus, and that is something that we need to also understand. These qualities, they don't require you to become a bhikkhu first. This is for everyone. So when you listen to the Dhamma, open your heart, listen fully. Don't be surprised. You might become a Sotapanna in just like that. Yes, some of you are giggling. Yes, I keep saying that. When I was in Malaysia, I was saying this. This is not something I'm making up. This is something I have witnessed again and again and again in the suttas. Also in real life, by the way, in case you're wondering. All right? That's why the Dhamma is alive. So we must listen to it as alive people, live beings, but without putting ourselves there as a screen, as a filter, fully opening the heart to listen. And how, bhikkhus, does the bhikkhu become a destroyer? Here, bhikkhus, the bhikkhu does not entertain nor hold on to any arisen sensual thoughts, and instead he quickly removes his attention from them as he dispels and destroys them by not allowing them to arise again. So you're destroying here the arisen sensual thoughts from dominating you. You're not just saying, well, it was my habit all my life, whenever I get a sensual thought, that I'm completely enmeshed by it, lost in it. So I'm just continuing that habit. You're not like that anymore. You're not allowing that to take over you. You're seeing sensual thoughts that have arisen as sensual thoughts that have arisen. So what do? These are enemies for the mind of a person that is becoming equanimous. You cannot be equanimous while sensual desires are running amok. You cannot do that. You have to understand one is superior than the other. One that brings you peace. Sensual desires, sensual thoughts are not going to bring us any peace. If they did, we would all be arahants by now, by following sensual lusts. So, here, bhikkhus, and also the bhikkhu does not entertain nor hold on to any arisen angry thoughts, and instead he quickly removes his attention from them as he dispels and destroys them by not allowing them to arise again. This is very important. It's not just sensual desires or thoughts that we are fighting against or destroying, using Lord Buddha's analogy or usage of the words, but so many times we keep allowing angry thoughts to lurk in the background. We don't seem to really treat them with seriousness. Like, okay, imagine you are going to sleep in your bedroom and there is a vicious animal that somehow snuck into your bedroom. Do you go ahead and sleep? No, you can't sleep a wink. You have to make sure the animal is out. But what we do is we not just sleep, but we continue living our lives with angry thoughts or lustful thoughts in the background. We say, well, I have it under control. You don't have it under control because you're just allowing it to be there and it's waiting for the right opportunity for it to strike. Imagine you have a cobra next to you, a very poisonous cobra. It will strike. That cobra cannot compare to our angry thoughts. Because you might even end up speaking on the Dhamma, but guess what? The angry thoughts are there to make every single part of that Dhamma become poisonous. It's not the Dhamma, but the intentionality behind it. So we need to become aware of these things and attack them. Yes, we have to destroy these. In our world of today, everybody's becoming soft, including towards treating or how to treat these tendencies. So we must be quite logical and straightforward with them. Realize that these are poisonous elements we have been entertaining. Further, the bhikkhu does not entertain nor hold on to any arisen harmful thoughts, and instead he quickly removes his attention from them as he dispels and destroys them by not allowing them to arise again. Similarly to the angry thoughts, because they are very much joined. When we have these angry thoughts, they sooner or later, even though you think that, oh, I have a lid on it, I'm holding myself from acting out these angry thoughts, sooner or later they will turn into resentment, and sooner or later it will take the shape of a harmful word, and it will attack. That's like venom. Or a harmful action that we commit. Well, all these are coming from thoughts. Remember the first verse of the Dhammapada? Mano pubbangama dhamma, mano seta mano maya. It's the mind. So we're trying to keep the mind pure. Further, the bhikkhu does not entertain nor hold on to any arisen evil thoughts. Now, this evil thoughts umbrella covers everything else. The angry, the harmful, and anything else that might seem to be a little bit more acceptable, but in essence, when you put it to the test, guess what? It is very, very insidious. It's toxic. You cannot have it be there. It's like having, if you're a new parent and you have your medicine cabinet for your child, you don't put, milk, other helpful, beneficial, nutritious things, medicine, things like that, and rat poison in the same cabinet, or something terrible in the same place. Or where you keep your fruits and vegetables, you don't keep something harmful there. So similarly, we have to be careful as to what we are allowing within us. So evil thoughts. And instead, he quickly removes his attention from them as he dispels and destroys them by not allowing them to arise again. In this manner, the bhikkhu becomes a destroyer. So you must be a destroyer, Lord Buddha is saying. In fact, he's encouraging us. And not just sit there on the passenger seat and expect things to just be perfect. Just arahantship is going to land like the leaves from a tree coming down slowly, or a feather floating from the sky and just landing in our lap. That's never going to happen. We must involve ourselves with serious work of taking care of business. We do it in everything else in our lives. How come not this? The most important. Right? So, and how bhikkhus does the bhikkhu become a protector? Here, bhikkhus, whenever the bhikkhu happens to see a visible object with his eyes, he does not allow himself to get pulled into nor grab onto its details or specific features. For he knows perfectly well that if he were to leave his eye faculty uncontrolled, then vile and dreadful unwholesome states of mind of longing and sorrow would soon overwhelm him. And because of this clear understanding, the bhikkhu practices restraint. During the day, the eyes are always collecting information, even the ones that you might not be able to notice that you're doing it consciously. So it's happening unconsciously, but it is nevertheless collecting information. And then later on, suddenly you might see a dream, and you're like, what? Where did this dream come from? Or you behave a certain way in your conscious state. We never question whether we actually had any contributions in this, whether we were responsible for some part of it. And here Lord Buddha is saying, you are absolutely, so long as you're not conscious of what it is that your eyes are picking up. So I've given many examples in the past of how, like in the case of when you are in a, let's say, checking your emails, when you are observing or you're walking or driving on the road and you see something that you would not be interested in looking at if you were alone. But suddenly it just showed up in your periphery, a vision. And the eye says, no, let's keep looking at this. So carelessly looking is going to give us suddenly other factors that will be sneaking in. It's like leaving the window or the door open, your main door of your house open. Well, you know what's going to happen soon enough. Rats and mice and other animals are going to come in. You cannot later on blame the rats. The rats are just doing their thing. So I'm giving you examples, of course, here of other forms of metaphors and analogies as to what this entails. Somebody might have a very faithful relationship with their loved one, but suddenly they have developed these interests in looking at other individuals, for example. And all of this is going to start a spiraling downward motion. And the person's mind is now shaken. The equanimity is gone. And this is one of the reasons why when we do retreats, we have to seclude ourselves from all those elements. As a teacher, as organizers, we have to be extra cautious not to have other factors be allowed into such a thing. That includes the outfits, the clothing. They have to be more conservative, so that no possibility might be presented for the mind, for the eyes, for example. Laughter, for example, in the Book of the Ones, in the Anguttara Nikāya, Lord Buddha talks about how nothing entices a man as much as a woman's voice. Well, guess what? He doesn't stop with men. He says nothing entices a woman more than the voice of a man. He just doesn't use the voice, by the way. Same with smell, touch, all these things. I just gave the example of a sound. So all these things have to be carefully protected in a retreat environment. Now you're no longer in retreat, so your job is to protect yourselves as if you're on retreat, if you really want to go deep. Similarly, whenever he happens to hear an audible sound, so you guessed it, we started with the eyes. So now we're going to be, Lord Buddha is addressing the sounds. So he's talking about the six senses, salayatana. Whenever he happens to hear an audible sound with his ears, he does not allow himself to get pulled into nor grab onto its details or specific features. For he knows perfectly well that if he were to leave his ear faculty uncontrolled, then vile and dreadful unwholesome states of mind, of longing and sorrow, would soon overwhelm him. And because of this clear understanding, the bhikkhu practices restraint. Not everything you hear will be perfect or delightful. Sometimes they're going to be just the opposite. What will this do to the mind? That's what Lord Buddha is always concerned about. So we are practicing restraint. It's not someone telling us, do this, don't do this. No. If anyone's doing playing such a role, it has to be us. You're protecting, you're guarding your house doors, your windows. You're not allowing just anything to come in. Isn't that what we do when we keep our loved ones inside the house? Or just ourselves? Some people have pets, and they don't even leave the door open because they know if they leave the door open, the dog, for example, might run outside and be hit by a car. Or never come back, something like that. So we use these tools, but we never seem to be using them for the right reasons, Lord Buddha is saying. Use them for your sixth sense doors, and you are fully protected, better than any palace, better than any security system you can even imagine. No security system can match this when you have very strong sati. Similarly, whenever he happens to smell an odor with his nose, I'll just go through these because it's a repetition, as you can tell. Similarly, whenever he happens to taste a flavor with his tongue, or touch a tactile object with his body, or whenever he happens to think about a cognizable thought or memory with his mind, he does not allow himself to get pulled into nor grab onto its details or specific features. For he knows perfectly well that if he were to leave his mind faculty uncontrolled, then vile and dreadful unwholesome states of mind of longing and sorrow would soon overwhelm him. And because of this clear understanding, the bhikkhu practices restraint. In this manner, the bhikkhu becomes a protector. So even when you're looking at a lovely photograph of some memory that is brought up from your past, do so with responsibility. When you're tasting something, when you're smelling something, don't just be there as a passenger. Do it with responsibility. What is my mind doing with me looking at this photograph? Am I longing for it to happen again? Am I sad because of this? Am I becoming dreadful, or for some reason be full of sorrow? All those states are doing what? Shaking the mind. Shaking the mind. And how can there be shaking of the mind and equanimity established? One of them has to give way. So in this sense, we are protectors, first and foremost towards ourselves. And how bhikkhus does the bhikkhu patiently endure? Here, bhikkhus, the bhikkhu patiently endures the cold, heat, hunger, thirst, the sting of yellow flies, mosquitoes, gadflies, creeping things, the wind and the scorching sun, as well as withstanding the painful feelings resulting from derogatory and harsh words spoken to him. He also patiently bears the arisen painful bodily feelings that are sharp, excruciating, and difficult to face, and that drain one of physical vitality, causing life to end. In this manner, the bhikkhu is one who patiently endures. Again, this is not just about bhikkhus. Insults don't just happen to bhikkhus, you know. It happens to us. Derogatory statements, situations where we feel like we are being mistreated. When I was in Asia a few weeks ago, some of you might recall, we faced some unpleasant situations when we were sitting outside in a park, a beautiful place at which we had scouted, and together with some students, some of you are here, we found it to be just delightful, perfect place to go and sit next to the waterfalls. And we did go and sit, and it was beautiful for a few minutes until people came and started treating us as if we're criminals. We were the best thing that could ever happen to that country. The best, because we're protectors. We're protectors of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. We were practically devas sitting there in the park. But the environment was not the best for that. Now, if the mind, and that's what I try to do with some of you, remind you to bring back equanimity, because the mind was jolted. All these things were happening because you saw, you heard, you felt insulted, hurt. All these things, they're not just happening to bhikkhus. So our thing is not just to be like a rock, to bear the cold, to bear the heat, to bear the hunger. No, there's a purpose. We have to understand, why am I bearing the thirst? You're chiseling yourself a character that has never been encountered by you before. You're becoming the super you. Things that you'd never thought could be possible by you. You are working towards that. Remember earlier I was saying the Dhamma doesn't fall like a feather from the sky into your lap? Well, you're preparing yourself for the Dhamma. Because even Sotapatti or Sakadagami or Anagami or Arahantship, they will not happen by accident. Nibbana will never happen by accident. It will happen as the result of work that you're doing. So if your sila is growing, then guess what? You are doing this. You're doing the work that I'm talking about here, that Lord Buddha is describing clearly. If your samadhi is growing, then guess what? You are practicing these things. If your discernment is becoming more and more palatable, more visible, more tangible for you, you're not making those same stupid mistakes as you used to before. Guess what? Your panya is growing. Well, what are you doing then? The 3 trainings. Who's doing it? You are. That's why Pacchatang Veditabbo Vinyuhi, Lord Buddha says, it is to be realized by the wise for themselves, individually. This is work, individual work, but it's also very enjoyable work. You're not doing this for someone else necessarily. First, you're doing this for yourself. And how bhikkhus is the bhikkhu one who courageously marches forward? Here, bhikkhus, the bhikkhu quickly goes in whatever direction or region which he had never gone to before. Excuse me. Even though having traversed in vast existences throughout the beginningless time, thus he traverses into the uncharted territories of stilling all mental conjurings, the giving up and relinquishment of all acquisitions, the destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, and nibbana. It is in this manner that the bhikkhu courageously marches forward. One of the most interesting things that I have experienced with students in interviews, etc., is when a student suddenly walks into or gets to a point where it is something that is unprecedented. That means they've never experienced anything like this. Something as simple as metta, the experiencing of metta when there is this tremendous joy. The student comes and says, Bhante, I don't know what's happening. Okay, you have to tell me more. What do you mean, what's happening? Well, my heart feels like it's going to blow up, explode with joy, with love. And my first question is that something bad? To be full of that much love? And they pause and they say, no, okay, but I've never experienced it before. That's what Lord Buddha is talking about here. You march forward into uncharted territories. What is a jhana? A jhana is experiencing the mind in such a way where you've never, ever experienced such an expansion of the mind. Some people feel terrified of equanimity when it happens. Upekkha. Suddenly they lose upekkha because they experience upekkha, but it's such a still state of mind that makes their old self come in and say, well, this is unusual. This is scary. Anything but scary, actually. So my job is to convince you, the practitioner, to not be afraid and to continue going into this uncharted territory. That's like the elephant that goes into whatever direction that the trainer sends him to. Now, in some rare occasions, you might be dealing with someone who is so staunchly attached to their old ways of limited thinking of themselves. Sometimes they're called limiting beliefs. The person will not see themselves deserving of such a level of experiencing of joy. It is important for us to not be afraid of pushing and trusting. This is where it's important for the individual student to trust the teacher. because you've never reached that point yet. And now you're there, and the teacher is saying, it's okay, breathe, don't panic, trust the Dhamma, trust the Dhamma. Not me, just trust the Dhamma. And trust what you're experiencing. Don't break sila. Continue your practice without creating tension, and always bring in that softer approach. Smile to yourself. Make sure there's enough metta for you first. And as the person does that, more and more doors will open. You will see with better eyes, and more dust will come off your eyes, as Lord Buddha says. So, but sometimes some individuals are so stuck up in their old ways of thinking and functioning, they will close the door. They will not grow. They will refuse because of their limiting beliefs about themselves. Years ago, when I was teaching leadership classes and college, and success to business ventures and those entrepreneurs who wanted to have their own businesses, and one interesting phenomenon I found, quite surprisingly, where individuals would come to me with tears in their eyes, not because they had a major epiphany, but simply because they wanted to be successful, they wanted to be happy, but for the first time they encountered this big, huge block that they established themselves, which it has the name, I don't deserve to have this. I don't deserve to be successful. I don't deserve to be happy. And encountering this firsthand, and they know it's their voice, their own beliefs, is shattering, is jolting to the point where the person starts to cry. I had one grown woman who rushed towards me in the hallway during my break time, and she said, I don't know why, but I just can't see myself to be happy. I just don't see myself to be successful. So could you help me? So basically, it is our own beliefs that are the obstacles. And in this case, we need to be courageously marching forward. Trust the Dhamma, if anything. Simply because you have never seen yourself reach those states does not mean that you don't, or these states are beyond you somehow. No. There was a time where you couldn't even stand on one leg. Now you can, or stand on both legs. They were unthinkable at one point. Now you don't even think twice. So without risking another break in the Wi-Fi, so let me just close this sutta. Thus, bhikkhus, by possessing these 5 traits, a bhikkhu becomes worthy of gifts, deserving of offerings, qualified to receive hospitality, well suited to receive reverential salutations with one's palms at the heart, and fit to be called the unsurpassed field of merits for the world. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So I hope this sutta was enjoyable and is powerful for you as well, whereby you can look at your own self and see aspects of your own progress in it, and how Lord Buddha already foresaw these challenges that we would be facing. So it brings back down Nibbana to the basic, requirements that we need to display, like taking charge of our 6 sense doors and what we're exposing them to, instead of being sucked into the details. It's just a sight. Yes, appreciate it. Yes, appreciate a beautiful sunset. Yes, we're not saying be blind. We're not saying don't feel. Let's say when you're tasting something delicious versus something that is tasteless. Lord Buddha never said become a robot. There were some teachers in the past, recent past, who were even claiming that becoming an arahant is like becoming a robot. That's complete nonsense. Complete nonsense. You look at Venerable Mahamoggallana, Venerable Ananda, Venerable Sariputta, and countless others in the suttas. They're so alive. They're so full of life and love, compassion. They're arahants. Well, you don't have to look at them. Look at Lord Buddha's example. So these are different, wrong views that people have come up with, thinking that, oh, in order for you to become closer and closer to a final nibbana, you have to become less human. That is incorrect. That is absolutely incorrect. But don't let your sixth sense doors lead you by the neck, or by the nose. Be smart about it. That's what Lord Buddha is encouraging us to do. So I will stop here and see if there are any questions. Oh. Bhante, how do we know when the state of our mind is not affected by sensual thoughts? Can we practice stopping thinking? Thank you. Well, stopping to think, that is not what we're directly trying to do. There are states like in the jhanic states, as in the 7th jhana and 8th jhana, etc., where that happens naturally. But coming to your question, as far as how do we know, the sensual, let me read your question, how the mind is not affected by sensual thoughts. Whenever there is calmness and tranquility in the mind, that means you are not subject to sensual thoughts at that moment. Now, it might change within a few other short moments. So you need to be at the captain's seat. You need to be running the show, meaning you're not just letting things just to, do their thing, and you're just, that's what I usually call passenger in your own life. You're driving, you're in the driver's seat. Now, as far as the bodily sensations, because I emphasize the body a lot, if you've noticed, because you cannot have thoughts, especially sensual thoughts, without having an impact, direct correlation in the body. Usually that takes the shape of heat. It takes the shape of shakiness. Your heart rate will go up. So when you're practicing sati proper, what you will notice are these changes, these fluctuations. Because one of the first things that happens if your sensual lust is becoming more dominant, your heart becomes racing, your body temperature rises, okay? And suddenly, things that you had, the mind that had reached this passaddhi or tranquility state, especially equanimity, disappears. That should serve you as a telltale sign that something is off, something is up, because your mind cannot stay still. Sati cannot be as still while at the same time sensual lust is dominating. It cannot work. Okay? So if you're having a difficulty maintaining sati, guess what? Either angry thoughts or lustful thoughts are there. Okay? Or ayoniso manasikara, your attention will change towards the lustful thing. Now you're going to look at that lustful image. That's ayoniso manasikara. That's wrong attention. For the deluded mind, that will be translated as, hey, I'm practicing sati. See? No, you're not. Your attention is on the wrong thing, because now you are captured by the details of this thing, the hopes of this thing, as evidenced by your heart racing. Your mind is unable to establish itself in tranquility. And those two are extremely very useful tools for us to detect that we are going on the wrong path. Okay? Lilith, you have your hand up. Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for great sutta.
Could you lower? There's a mic somewhere.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, that was because we are in the same room with Arif. That's why. This was like that. Thank you very much for the sutta. I want to clarify a small thing on the part of observing the feelings. Lately, I was doing this during the day whenever I was in the work or some other things, and I've realized that first thing that it's stopping it, like the thinking or whatever, or whatever comes from this six sense doors. Then I thought it's better observe, but then the mind starts to give evaluations, like, is this a good, bad, like as a pleasurable, unpleasurable, or neutral? Now I understand that from whatever you are saying, that observing is the key. And in this case, what do you advise to do? Like, what I don't know. It might seem somewhat technical, but yeah, I need some steps here. Thank you very much.
Yes, this is a very important question, because you have to be technical, you know. In a sense, when you look at the Noble Eightfold Path, it's all about, you know, technicalities here and there. Of course, we need to apply a lot of right brain activity to understand the relationships and the nuances, etc. But coming back to the nuts and bolts, as we say, of okay, the six sense doors, I'm observing them. Just being able to observe opens up so many doors of possibilities. Suddenly your sati becomes refined thanks to these six sense objects coming in. It's almost like, you know, ancient humans used to get rocks and they used to sharpen them by hitting them with other rocks. That's how they would make arrowheads and spearheads. So they would sharpen it by hitting it with other objects. So imagine your sati becoming sharper thanks to sati becoming sharper and more precise thanks to you looking at the object of the eyes, let's say, in a much more clearer way than you normally would have, which was absent-mindedly, or asati. Okay, asati means mindless. Sati means mindful, remembering to see. And as you're doing this, you will see that this has nothing to do with the thing that is being seen, or the thing that is being felt, the thing that is being touched, the thing that is being tasted, or etc., etc. This has a lot to do with your relationship with what it is that you're seeing. What normally, this is going to happen thanks to your observation skills becoming sharper. This is you sharpening that arrowhead. Thanks to the very same thing that you're looking at, for example. Okay? So you're seeing it now, but you're not just there as an absent passenger, you know, absent-minded passenger. You're curiously looking, you're curiously watching, without adding your interpretations, though. This is where a lot of people who are very intellectual get stuck. Now, remember what I said earlier about sensual lust or sensual thoughts, where a person, you know, how can we know what's happening? Well, you watch if there is tranquility of mind in place as you're observing. Because intellectually engaging or labeling, years ago, decades ago, when I was doing Mahasi method of just labeling, noting, what I noticed was quite a strange, undesired effect. Suddenly I noticed that my heart rate was increasing. My body temperature was increasing. And there definitely was no quietude. Meanwhile, I'm not allowing anything to slip by me. I'm like a very hypersensitive, in fact, ADHD doorkeeper with a gun, waiting to shoot down anything that came in my way. I was very alert, but there was No, there is no wholesome sati. That's why Lord Buddha says samma sati, wise, healthy, harmonious, understanding, appropriate sati, mindfulness. So if you're noticing that your observation is increasing your agitation in the mind, pull back. Pull back. You're too involved in the interpretation process. You're not doing the practice properly, because you have to observe it. You're seeing, there's a sutta where Lord Buddha talks about practicing sati proper. He says, imagine you're sitting not far from two houses in front of you, and you know who's entering and who's leaving the houses. That's a perfect example. Use that. So I hope that's good. Yes, Grace or Ravi, I think you have a question.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Bhante,
Good
evening.
Good evening.
I actually would like to ask you, with regard to memory and imagination, a lot of times in the observation, the familiarity comes into auto drive. What is habitual and what is moving you is familiarity. I'm trying to break familiarity, and it's actually getting more calm, more still, and in the stillness, there's quite a long gap. Seeing an intention arise and having that ability to discern what next. There's a long wait actually between like entertaining the mind and avoiding familiarity. How do you move into seeing this and changing habits actually? Maybe Bhante, you could help to
Yes,
clarify.
I will try. The way you described it, it's quite well. The English word that comes to mind is exquisite. To be able to see each of these segments of experience, mental experience taking place, requires tremendous slowing down, a process of slowing down. So you're able to see things that you are not able to see. This is what we can also term as a mini yatabhutang pajanati, to be able to see things how they come to be, how they're unfolding. Well, yatabhutang pajanati is not something that is happening outside, where you're seeing how things come to be outside of you. First and foremost, they must take place within us, meaning things that are already taking place within us, of course, but we're able to see them for the first time. So when you're saying about familiarity, when you're thinking, when you're observing, and am I caught in the habit or habitual pattern of expecting, or is there a favoritism in the things that I like to see? Absolutely. And it's part of manjana. Manjana is imagining or trying to even visualize, try to add our own nuances to things that are taking place. We're not interested in those things. We're interested in the mind's relationship or relationships to whatever is happening. Remember, what you're talking about is the sixth perception. The sixth meaning the mind. The mind is the big one. The mind is far more superior than any of the other five senses, because the other five senses do not have memory. The eyes just see. The tongue just tastes. The body simply feels the touch, etc. But it's the mind that uses these five and creates newer and newer stories that it is aware of or has some record of, so that it can do compare and contrast. Remember earlier I was talking about the direction, marching in the direction that is unfamiliar fearlessly. The mind doesn't like to do that, the one that is attached to ignorance or wrong view. So we need to be able, in order for us to break through, you are developing a newer, a bigger capacity of understanding. That's what's taking place. But you will never be able to do that without yoniso manasikara. And what is the evidence of this? As you are progressing, that yes, I am progressing, what you were describing earlier, to be able to see these different nuances. A strip of film, for example, 24 frames a second. That means every second, 24 frames are played. Every animation, every movie must have at the very least 24 frames per second play in order for your eyes not to catch that there's a strobing, that this is just a series of images. These are not actual movies. This is not a video. Well, it's a fake thing that the mind is doing. So what you are doing, what you described, is the mind being able to squarely look at each of these, or at least see the gaps between each of these frames. So this is what's happening first, and then this, and then this. So in a very practical, applicable way of giving you a tool in reference to your question, would be to continue your practice and to develop and harness your sati in such a way where, without you going around looking for something, that's the key. Do not go looking for something. Just observe as it's taking place. This, for a lot of people's egos, will be too much to ask, I know. But that's where we need to have humility and trust of the Dhamma. Trust of the Dhamma. And that's why we practice sati. So I will leave it at that, because otherwise it will take another 2 hours. I want to jump to the other question here. Okay. From Joe. Bhante, why do we sometimes experience joy and even excitement during meditation? Where is it coming from? Even though we are not thinking about any happy thoughts, memories. What usually, I would have to ask more questions here, but individually, not in a group like this. But typically, this would be an indication that the person is experiencing some of the factors of the jhanas, specifically the first jhana, because joy is a big one there. It's one of the factors of jhana. So nothing to be afraid of. Especially, and I like the fact that you mentioned in the bottom how, even though we're not thinking about any happy thoughts, that's crucial. Otherwise, it could just be what I was mentioning to Ravi. It could be a process of manana, or imagining, visualizing something. That's why when I show you the metta practice, there's very little bit of visualization, a very tiny little bit, just to know that this is my spiritual friend, and that's it. Otherwise, if you focus on the visualization part, then you will fake certain emotional responses from you because of the visualization, the images that could be conjuring up old memories, and now your body's feeling a certain way. That's not jhana. That's just you faking yourself, so that, because you're not wanting to get bored, basically. So visualization is out of the question here. But what I am understanding you're saying, the answer to that would be simple, natural responses. But don't make a big deal about it. Experience it. Don't push it away. You didn't ask for it to happen. It's happening. So it's a gift. You're getting a cookie, basically. Eat the cookie, but don't make an altar for it, okay? And remind yourself, when you get bored, remind yourself, hey, this is not all pain. It's not about back pain, leg pain. There's also good things too. So be fair, okay? There's another question here. Usually the question has to have Bhante. So we don't just start, and we need to show respect. So doesn't the way, so the person is just jumping in. So please, next time you ask a question, say Bhante, and then that's a normal way of asking a bhikkhu or a teacher. Doesn't the way you eat and what you eat have a lot to do with your success in keeping good sati? Doesn't the way you eat and what you eat have a lot to do with your success in keeping good sati? I think I might not be understanding the full extent of your question, but I'm going to try to answer what I am understanding from your question. So doesn't the way you eat and what you eat have a lot to do? Well, sometimes it is something that you always crave to eat. So, but the way you eat, of course, there needs to be some level of sati. And in this case, sati can also be the absence of other things, the absence of memories, the absence of the images as to what brought you here, how the food was brought in front of you, etc., where you are present, where you are simply tasting. The tasting is taking place. So that is what I can extract from your question. So yes, that will be good sati. In fact, to the point where in the case of a highly evolved person, it will also be a doorway to even awakening, like in the case of Venerable Bahia. When tasting, when feeling, when sensing, just sense Bahia, Lord Buddha said. What that brings in it, it's a very small teaching, a very short teaching, but it's packed with so much Dhamma for the person who knows where to look and what to look for. It definitely has proper yoniso manasikara, and proper yoniso manasikara, what that means is it is full of sati. It is sati. It is the perfection of sati. That's yoniso manasikara, because it also includes within it samadhi. Okay? Yoniso manasikara cannot be micchaditthi or ditti. It has to be fully present, drenched, anchored in wise awareness, wisdom, discernment, panya. So ultimately, that's where we're going. So sati and yoniso manasikara are the same thing essentially. If it's reached its peak, it is yoniso manasikara, and it has to be within it. It has to have within it wisdom. And it's not just us being present, because otherwise it will be wrong type of sati. Okay? Miccha sati, if you will, versus samma sati. You know, you have a lot of movement, and I touch upon this in my book, which you have, where I talk about what's wrong with mindfulness today. You have people who talk about sports and sati, sex and sati, eating and sati, all kinds of things and sati. It's a big, seller in the world. People have made millions and millions of dollars, and they keep continuing doing so. Business and sati, that's not what we're talking about eating with good sati here. So there needs to be wisdom. So we need to go beyond just mere success with having good sati. So I hope that answers that question. And yes, I think I've answered, unless there's other questions hovering somewhere. Because the longer we are here, the more chances there will be for the connection to be lost again. Again, next week, or definitely in 2 weeks, I will be in a different location in Europe. So I am confident that it will be a lot better Wi-Fi than where I am right now. But I'm very grateful that we've been able to do this much even today. So, well, if there are no more questions, then what we'll do is we'll transfer some merits together. Akasata Chibumata Deva Nagamahidika Punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika. Punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata deva nagamahidika. Punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mamparanti. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. It's been great having you back and seeing you again. May the blessings of the Triple Gem be with you, and may you fearlessly move forward in the directions unknown by your trust in the Dhamma, in the Triple Gem. Don't be afraid. Practice. Practice. Don't be afraid. You have this precious human birth. Don't let it go to waste. Okay? All right. So until next time, with better Wi-Fi connection. Be well. May the Triple Gem's blessings be upon you. Keep smiling. Sukhi hot.